What's up, guys? Clocky clocking in. I've had a whole weekend with the Nintendo Switch 2, and I wanted to share my thoughts on the console. I've played lots of different games on it, and I'm happy to say that I'm impressed with it. I've owned a few handheld consoles over the years, including the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally, and this one really stands out to me. It's definitely not the end-all definitive way to enjoy every video game. The Switch 2 definitely has its pros and cons. I hope by the end of the video you can understand whether or not the Switch 2 is something you should be interested in buying yourself. I'll get into my experiences with it and what I've loved and not liked about the console, but I first wanted to clear the air. There has been a ton of controversy and misinformation about this console that has led to tons of infighting and negativity in tons of comment sections. I want this video to be free of that. Everyone is entitled to their own opinions, and no one is more valid than any other person. You are allowed to feel one way or another about this console and the company attached to it, but you are not allowed to attack each other personally. We've had enough hate in this world, and I don't want that here. With that out of the way, let's get into all of the different ways with how I've enjoyed the Switch 2 this past weekend. I've got a 65-inch Samsung TV with HDR, and Mario Kart World and Breath of the Wild looked beautiful on it. All the lighting effects in every game with HDR look incredible. It's taken Nintendo way too long to get into this space, but I'm glad they finally did. I do not enjoy how warm the Switch 2 gets in the dock, though. It can get pretty hot. Granted, it feels like most handhelds deal with this in one way or another, but it's always slightly alarming. Thankfully, the dock has built-in fans that help cool the console down, so hopefully that'll help with the longevity. I also had to travel over to some relatives this past weekend and had some time to play the Switch 2 while on the car ride over. I really wanted to give the Switch 2 a good test while on handheld, so what better way to test it with than a re-release of a game that came out 10 years ago? I've never played the Yakuza Like a Dragon games before, and lots of people have praised these games up and down, so I figure I'd give this one a shot. I played for about an hour in the car with the brightness set to max on airplane mode. At the end of the drive, I was at about 68% battery. I put it in sleep mode, and later grabbed it that night to play some more. I'd say it was about 6 hours later, and the battery had only dropped 1%. I then played for another hour with airplane mode off, and I was at about 10% left once I finished the first chapter of the game. To me, this is fantastic. With my ROG Ally, I'm lucky to get an hour out of it without me having to plug it in, especially at max brightness. If I can keep the brightness down and play a game that doesn't require too much processing power, I can get close to an hour and a half out of it. Yakuza 0 Director's Cut is a lot of fun, and this game looks fantastic on the Switch 2 screen. I've also had to play a fair amount of Mario Kart World handheld as well, and had similar experiences with the battery life and how the screen looks. This console feels fairly comfortable to hold, and it's not too bulky. It's just as slim as the first Switch, and the LCD screen, to me, is just as good as the OLED. I have like small, fat baby hands, and this hasn't been too uncomfortable to hold. I've actually kind of enjoyed it. I haven't had to the grips or anything that I've ordered yet, so I've just been handling it like this, and it's a ton of fun. And then if my hands ever get too tired, the screen's big enough that I can just take the Joy-Cons off and put it on like the coffee table in front of me, and I can still see what I'm doing. It's nice. Mario Kart World is the only launch title for the Nintendo Switch 2, with every other game on it either being a re-release of an older game or Deltarune. Mario Kart World is definitely a step up in the series for me personally. It's a ton of fun to play either on my own, with friends, or online. The courses are a blast. The straightaways and the cups and the knockdown tour can seem boring at first, but between wall riding, grinding rails, and the crazy amount of traffic and boost pads, you'll find that there's plenty along the way to have fun with between each course. I've been having a ton of fun with the free roam, actually. Believe it or not, it's a ton of fun. The P-switches remind me of the shrines in Breath of the Wild, with each one having a little puzzle for me to solve. They do a great job of highlighting all the fun ways you can bounce off walls and grind rails. I even love the photo mode where I can take pictures, and then I can send them over to the app on my phone to share. This is technology that's literally been here for like 6 years, and finally, finally, the Nintendo Switch 2 has it. The new Knockdown Tour is basically Mario Kart's version of a battle royale. I wasn't sure I'd enjoy this mode at first, but it's a fun mode to hop into for like half an hour and enjoy your races. I like it a lot. Is this whole experience worth $80 though? No. If I could tell you that later updates and DLC are going to all be free, then I think it's totally worth the price. But without that info, I would not grab this game if you don't get it without the bundle. At $50, it's absolutely worth it. $70 would be like cutting it, but 80 is nah. No way. I did also get a brief chance to try out the Gamechat feature with a friend, and honestly, it was kind of nice. The Switch 2 is really good at separating game audio from your voice. I was using Gamechat while the Switch 2 was undocked, and I had Mario Kart's Jazz Band at full blast, and my friend couldn't hear any of it. It's definitely not perfect, But I will say it's a nice quick alternative to Discord if you don't have all the stuff near you to make a Discord call happen. I mentioned that I have owned other handhelds. Lots of people have been comparing the Nintendo Switch 2 to the Steam Deck. It's been a minute since I owned the Steam Deck. I can't remember if the battery was the same or worse. I doubt the battery on the Steam Deck is much better, if at all, than the Nintendo Switch 2. The Steam Deck also runs on Linux, so any game with an anti-cheat won't work on the Steam Deck. So if you want Fortnite on a handheld, the Switch 2 is probably your best bet. The Steam Deck is a fantastic experience if you plan on sticking to only the SteamOS on it, though. If you have an existing Steam library and aren't interested in buying Nintendo games in the slightest, then the Steam Deck is a much better buy. Other handhelds in the market are good and run on Windows. I would say these are a much better option for you if you plan on playing games outside of the Steam library in whatever fashion you like. The battery on these devices can be bad, though. So if you're okay with always being near a plug, then you're set. One of the biggest things the Switch 2 has on these, however, is the ability to dock your Switch and play games at a good, consistent frame rate with a console experience on TV. I've used my ROG Ally with a laptop dock, and while it works, it's hard to have a consistent experience with it. The controller I'd use would randomly disconnect, or the TV would have issues with properly displaying the correct resolution. I wouldn't say these are inherent issues with the ROG Ally, but they are things that just work when it comes to the Switch 2. So the Switch 2 has a lot of pros, including Nintendo's vast game library, updated graphics on older titles, and a fantastic launch title that has a ton of fun. But what are the cons? There's lots of stuff that's been thrown around about the price of things. The console being $450 US is pretty on point with other devices in the same vein. Mario Kart World being $80 though, no. That's not okay. I think the console being $450 is great for the power that it has, but I would say though that Mario Kart is worth it for $50. But for $80, I tell you just to go get that new Sega racing game with Hatsune Miku, dude. Come on. The new Mario Kart has been a lot of fun, but it isn't anything life-changing. There's also, okay, we got to talk about the game key cards. I can understand the thought process behind these cards. The Switch 2 cards can only fit like 64 gigabytes of game on them. This way, developers could choose to have a physical copy of a game that people can show off on their shelf and just resell. However, this could be like terrible for preservation. What if, like, just down the road, just kind of like we got rid of the 3DS eShop, we just get rid of the Nintendo Switch eShop, like 15 years. And I know you're thinking, 15 years is a long time from now. I'm living a short, happy life. I'm telling you, 15 years down the road, if you got a bunch of game key cards and you forgot to install stuff and you want to replay a game, you can't. You need the internet. That thing's useless. I hate that. It's 64 gigabytes. We could try to fit some of that on there. You know, or Nintendo could think of a better way to fit more data onto a smaller space. I feel like we're getting there, but it's expensive. I get it, but come on. Not being able to own your own games is abysmal. I mean, yes, all of Steam is also software, but you can at least access your games outside of the DRM. And most games on the PS5 require a day one patch, but they'll still play without internet. I know that Nintendo is even technically doing this with titles like Pokemon Legends ZA, where every copy is like technically just the Switch 1 version of the game. In the Switch 2 cases, they just have the upgrade code. It's literally the Switch 1 version of the game and then an upgrade code with it. Otherwise, like, you know, if you didn't have that code, you're just playing the Switch 1 version of the game. I assume the frames are less. Like, it'll run, but you won't hit 120 frames. You know, your resolution will probably be like 1080p locked. When it might do 4K at 60 frames on a TV screen. I mean, that would be nuts, but it's possible. But is that worth like 10 more bucks? I mean, it's like they're locking the settings behind a $10 paywall. I hate that, because any other video game, that would just be in there. That would just be in there. This hopefully is the only time this happens as we're making the transition to the Switch 2, but like, who knows? I do know that if a game cart has a key symbol on it, though, I'm probably not buying that cart. All in all, the Switch 2 is a fantastic upgrade from the Switch. It does everything you'd hope it'd do and a little more. It overshadows the heck out of the Switch. However, I would probably hold off on buying one until Donkey Kong Bonanza comes out and we see how that game looks. Mario Kart is fun, but I don't think it's worth the $80 price tag. If you can get it bundled, that's the way to go. And if you already have an existing Steam library and don't like Nintendo games, I don't know why you would think the Nintendo Switch 2 would change your mind, but it's definitely not going to. I've been having a ton of fun with it. It's definitely a device I'm going to use a ton in the future. I know, in between taking care of my son and spending time with my wife and my family and everything, I'm glad that I have a device I can take with me on the go that'll run games like really well with honestly what is a decent battery life. I know I mentioned earlier that 2 hours was kind of all I got out of it. In my opinion, that's great. A lot of other handheld consoles on the market, they don't even touch that, which is sad to say, but That's the state of things right now. And it's small, you know, the fact that it's this small and the battery life goes for that long and the screen on this thing cooks like it does. And when I played Yakuza and Mario Kart World handheld, I didn't see any frame drops. It was all smooth, like buttery smooth. So I'm impressed. I honestly think it's a fantastic piece of hardware. The biggest downside to me is that the launch library is a little subpar, but it'll grow as time goes on. And I think especially with the holidays coming up here soon, you'll have some fantastic. You'll have a Pokemon game on it by then. You'll have Donkey Kong Bonanza will be on it by then. I will hope that the GameCube library will be a bit bigger on it too, and we'll have some other GameCube games on there as well. And at the end of the day, it's just going to keep getting better and better. It's already at a fantastic starting point. I highly recommend looking into getting one during the holidays. It's a fantastic device. It's good. Is it good? If you're a Nintendo fan, it's fantastic. Anyway, this is Clocky. Clocking out. I'll see you guys around.